Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Babbling Irons live fan show with myself, Mike, and we've got E20 Zone TV with us today. How are you doing, mate?
All good, mate. Relieved.
Yeah, I think most of us are relieved now. We're pretty much safe. We should be safe if Leicester lose to Liverpool tonight. We might have another guest join in shortly, so we'll keep our eyes peeled for that. But yeah, this one's to just discuss a few things that have been coming up. Let's start with the big one, which is AZ Alkmaar. Massive game on Thursday. We obviously rested a lot of players yesterday. Obviously, the performance was diabolical, but we're just going to move past that and focus on to Thursday. A really big game. It's going to be another tough test. We've only got that goal advantage. We'll start with you, E20. How did you feel about last week's performance and your confidence going into this second leg? Because we were struggling for a lot of that game, and we're kind of lucky to get ahead in terms of the tie because we've only got a 1-goal advantage now.
I agree, mate. I agree. I thought we got away with it on Thursday night, if I'm being realistic. Don't get me wrong. They weren't much, but nor were we. And they scored a goal against the run of play. I don't like the way West Ham play at the minute, this sort of possum attack sort of thing. Like we wait for the other team to attack us before we attack. I'd rather West Ham be on the front foot. Or other ways, they always will fancy that sort of way of going around it. But we got the win, which is the main thing. The only fear I have on Thursday night, for me personally, is if we go there, we set up in a way to wait for them to attack us, and if they score and get their crowd up for it, then we might buckle. You know what I mean? I want West Ham to be on the front foot on Thursday, and if we can get a goal early, then we could kill the tie as a whole.
Mike, how do you see it coming this Thursday? Because it's going to be a completely different game. Obviously, they're at home. They're playing some really good football. I think they're unbeaten at home in European football for a long time, and it's going to be a tough game. You're on mute, I think.
Yeah, I think it's 2001 since they last lost at home in Europe. So wow. It's been a while. That being said, again, I can't, say that I know exactly who they played in that period. So it could be absolute dross they played in that period as well. But, ultimately, they don't have to lose that game on Thursday to go out. That's the thing we need to look at. We don't actually have to beat them to go through. We can draw and go through in this game. So it's not as big a problem. I think the problem is we are going to see us set up in the traditional Moyes fashion of in his mind, we're 1-0 up at half time. So we've got 45 minutes to go in this half time of this game. And that's to which to protect, to lead and hit them on the counter attack. Truthfully, I don't think he knows how to play another way, really, with these players and to get anything out of them, which is asking for issues. Their best player is coming back on Thursday. He was their left back, whose name has escaped me. I think Carlson is still injured at AZ as well. So that's obviously a big loss for him. Yes, they won 5-1 during the week and played a lot of their first teamers, but I think they made a lot of subs around about the 60th minute. And also, the Eredivisie is an interesting league because the standard is Premier League, Championship, and probably League One all in one league. So it's always an interesting one looking at that league and making judgments on, wins and so on, because the standard is so disparate that it's quite difficult to really kind of judge sometimes just how good they were. And I think when we look at AZ in the last game, very good technically, don't have a huge amount of pace, I would suggest and say. But when we turn on a bit of pressure and a bit of pace, they seem to struggle, and which is it's funny for us saying when we turn on the pace because we often don't see it, right? But when we turned that on, they did struggle and buckle a little. So I think the important thing is an early goal, but as we've seen throughout the year, we're one of the lowest goal scorers within the first 15 minutes across any competition. So it's difficult to say that we're going to go out with a positive mentality because we're 1-0 up at half time for Moyes, really.
Yeah.
What about, there's been a couple of other things building up to this game that people are starting to debate online. It's actually around personnel with who's going to start the match, because let's start with the first one, the goalkeeping position. Obviously, Areola made a big mistake in the first leg, and people kind of calling for Fabianski to come in for the second leg when he's been our European goalkeeper for, the past 2 seasons. Do you think that's the right decision to make, or would you guys stick with Areola? Because we saw even at the weekend, yes, Fabianski did make a few good saves, but look at the first goal. It's equally as poor as what Areola did.
Don't get me wrong. Areola made a howler the other week, but he has got us to 2 semi-finals in the last 2 years. If you look at it that way, like if you look at it from a positive mentality, like I do, I'm not really that deep on Areola. Like I think Fab's got mistakes in him as well. Do you know what I'm saying? I think like they're both as bad as one another to a point. The only issue that I have, if it goes to penalties, then I would want Fabianski in goal. I wouldn't mind Moyes subbing Fabianski on because, let's be honest, if Areola's in goal for penalties, we ain't winning. Do you know what I'm saying? So I'm not really fussed about either or.
City, didn't we? Areola in goal on penalties.
Yeah, but it was Foden put it wide, didn't he?
Yeah, but still.
Do you know what I mean? So, but I'd rather have Fab in goal because you just know he's a bit of a. He seems to save a big penalty. He's always got a big penalty save in him.
Do you guys understand the reaction or like the initial reaction to drop Areola for Fabianski after Areola made one mistake and he's like we've mentioned with so many players. I mean we mentioned it earlier with 4Nows on Twitter. There's players deprived of minutes, deprived of actual game time. So when it comes to these players coming in, as soon as one player makes one mistake, I think a few people referred to the 4Nows one at the weekend. He made a really bad corner, so that's the reason as to why he should not be playing. But why do people pick out these one instances when there's players that are playing in the Premier League for such a long period where they make mistakes and they're kind of forgiven for the next week?
I'm going to be honest. You don't really want to mention 4Nows to me because I'm not his biggest fan, mate, at all. Like I think he's massively overhyped for me personally. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know why it is, but you've got to look at the team that has played against Manchester United recently, which done all right. And I just think a lot of people are easy to just jump on someone as soon as they're down. Do you know what I mean? As soon as they make a mistake, it's like I told you so mentality, rather than get them back up again and say, come on, we need you. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what? I don't care who plays as long as we get the result that is the right result. Do you know what I'm saying? The problem is after what I see yesterday, some of these second string players ain't fit to be at West Ham anymore, in my opinion, personally.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of changes and, as we mentioned before, they just haven't had minutes and they just haven't had that game time. So it's easy to kind of picture, look at that Brentford game and think, so many players aren't good enough when in reality, they haven't been given a sufficient chance to prove that they are or they aren't because they just haven't played the minutes. So another kind of debate as well, let me come to you here, Mike, was around Agard. Again, made kind of sloppy error in possession against Brentford. Now people are kind of saying, will it be better to bring Ogbonna in instead of Agard for that match because we're going to be in that low block? A lot of, we're going to have to try and make a lot of clearances, and obviously Ogbonna's a bit more reliable in that sense. What's your take on it? Who would you go with on Thursday?
No, I wouldn't bring it on Ogbonna. I know people love Ogbonna, but he's a player that I feel is often his history and his performances are rewritten consistently. He has just as much as an error as Agard. The problem is Agard will try and make an adventurous pass into a dangerous area where if a player turns, you've beat probably the first two lines of a press, but if they give the ball away, it's right on top of your defence. Now, he's a high risk player in that respect. So when they do those things and it doesn't come off, easy to criticise. I think Ogbonna is just as bad as Diop was at time. And people are going to say, that's ridiculous. But the amount of times you will see Ogbonna will hesitate and look at his fellow partner in defence for them to make a choice. He does it consistently. A bit like with Big Ginge. He will put his head on stuff. He'll put his head on the line. But the simple truth of the matter is there is a ricket in him. But it's one of those players that seems to be protected or their mistakes are highlighted much less than others. Maybe because they're not as pronounced as others. Like Agard's passes, for instance, they're quite pronounced, quite obvious. And maybe when other players do it, like I've seen with Ogbonna plenty of times West Ham, his time at West Ham, whilst he's been solid, he has cost us goals. He has put us under pressure, same as we saw with Big Ginge. But because there's this perception of him being a hard worker, puts his body on the line, does the simple things, there is also then this, I guess, slightly blinkered and slightly clouded view of when they make mistakes or their hesitations because it's actually, it's the other person's thing to deal with.
I think also, Mike, as well, as we didn't even mention it, Slog made a great point that again, those two, look at the mistake against Crystal Palace and Brentford, he's not really playing on his natural side. So it's like you mentioned, forcing Yarmolenko kicking with his right foot. It has to be a Gerd Zuma. So it's kind of a difficult situation because it's a semi-final second leg. It's a chance to get to a final. So Moyes and others might be thinking, we just bring in Ogbonna here. We just have to try and be solid. Don't play those risky passes because we know how technically good AZ can be and were in the first leg. And especially playing at home, we're going to be pinned back a little bit more than the first leg. And they're probably going to have a little bit more possession as well because, they kind of unexpectedly took the lead. Let's be honest. They didn't really have anything in terms of threatening a goal, but they had a nice, flurry of possession throughout the match and they kept the ball really well. So that's where people are kind of trying to say, Ogbonna, I don't agree with it, but that's kind of the argument. But do you think Moyes
the other thing is the counter argument to that, you would say, Frankie, is I'm pretty sure, again, as a professional footballer, can take instruction of, I don't want you to play passes into midfield. I want you to hit it long, put it over the top and get Antonio on it, or play safe sideways and backwards passing. He's a professional footballer. I'm pretty sure if that's his direction, he can do that. He tries to make those passes because he can make those passes. That is the difference. Ogbonna doesn't and can't make those passes. We've seen that's been highlighted throughout his career at West Ham. He does not and has not made those passes or tries to attempt those passes. We have a Gerd player who can, and he will look to take it upon himself, take some responsibility in which to force play. Now, if he's given a direction of, I don't want you to do that, we're going to play no-risk football, we're not going to play out from the back, we're going to hit it long, we're going to play the first and second balls, that's what you're going to do, I'm sure he can take that direction. And I would probably prefer to have two centre-backs with a bit of pace to cover any of those passes in behind, rather than having Ogbonna and Cresswell, because we know it's going to be Cresswell, in that left side.
Yeah.
Where we're going to be lacking pace, and the right side is going to be big enough.
Last season it was that lack of pace, and Cresswell kind of being caught out on a couple of occasions where that situation arose. So having someone like Gerd and Zuma, who have both got decent recovery pace, can save us if we do get caught out. So E20, how do you see it, mate? How do you kind of go into it if you're Moyes on Thursday? Would you be a bit more pragmatic, as we probably expect he will be, or would you try and take the game to AZ and catch them out a little bit? Because defensively in the first leg, when we did press a little higher and we did try and catch them out, there were gaps to exploit and there were opportunities we just didn't take.
Got to play a Gued, mate. He's one of the best centre halves at the club with Zuma. Like, we ain't got many centre halves, but he's one of them. Like, them two together will be fine. I just think the fan base get overhyped with the Palace and the Brentford game, but they forget the Manchester United performance where he was excellent. Do you know what I'm saying? Now for Gued is a good, very, very good footballer. Right, the only fear I have with him is in the air. On the ground and down the sides, he's perfect. Right, any pace that's going down the sides, he's onto it. Someone just said there about Cresswell and the recovery pace. He's got that. Now for Gued, yeah. So he's a very, very good player. I will be very angry if Ogbonna plays in this game over Gued, because it's just not the right move. Like, you're trying to go with experience when we need young, fresh defenders, and this is the problem with West Ham this season. And hopefully next season they get it addressed. But I can't see it. We've got too many aging players at our club. Right, we've got too many people in their 30s who are literally on the way out, and we still think they're going to do a job like they was in their 20s. Do you know what I'm saying? So for me, Gued's got to play.
Contract, didn't they? The amount of people you see, Cresswell give a new contract. Antonio, give him a new contract. Fabianski, give him a new contract. We are the oldest squad in the Premier League.
And the problem is with that, is that I look at it that it's been poor management for one, and it's been poor planning. Like, it just shouldn't be like that. But
there's no succession, is there? No actual planning. That's the problem. And we got a lot of players going out of contract this summer. We have a lot of players going into their final year in the summer as well. One of those is Souček, who let's not forget has been a mainstay for Moyes, which has been much criticism. And yet in the summer, Moyes not only was turned around and rejected him getting a new contract, he didn't think he was worth the money, and was kind of intimating probably possibly be happy for him to go, then does not drop him when he's out of form and playing terribly. So you then have to question the manager's judgment, because it's like, you've now put the club in a bind because we could have secured him on a long-term contract. Yes, we might have overpaid slightly on his wage, but it'd been a long-term contract, protected his value in the club. But as a manager, you rejected that opportunity and now put us in a position where we have essentially a weakened asset in terms of our ability to get more money from him in the summer if we choose to sell him because of a very poor decision based on, granted, he was doing bad, but I don't always think we necessarily think about the long term in those kind of conversations. And much to your point, it points to how terrible we are with our future planning, that we allow these situations to arise. Because I think now we have Fornals will be in his last year, Souček will be in his last year. Technically, Souček will be in his last year. Soufal will be into, potentially his contract's up technically this summer, unless he signed the 2-year extension. Lanzini's gone in the summer, which I think is probably about fair now for him. But again, he still has a 2-year extension if we want to do that. Ben Johnson's also going to be in his last year as well, which I know some people say is no great loss. But if you also look at how Ben Johnson was last year to this year, you would maybe suggest that given the right direction, we might pull back a player that was good. But it's that we don't really seem to have protected ourselves. And we've got a summer of rebuilding again. And then the next season, another summer of rebuilding. It's a constant rebuild cycle with no real direction, which is probably why we're looking at the director of football to kind of give us some sort of actual 5-year plan as to these are the players for these years. Then we're going to phase these ones out to bring in X, Y, and Z. I don't think we really have that level of planning.
We'll get onto that really shortly. That's going to be our next topic. But just to kind of end this one, it's actually a nice question from Slob. I don't know how the ruling works with the yellow card system, but Slob's basically saying, would you start Paqueta with him sitting on a yellow card at the moment, or would you bring him off the bench if needed? Because if he does get another yellow, he could potentially miss the final. Again, I don't know if that is the rule, because I know it reset at the quarters, but it might be if you get 2 yellow cards in the semis that you miss the final. If that is the case, Paqueta is going to be living dangerously. We know he kind of makes trouble, and yellows did reset after the quarters, so he goes into it with 1 yellow card. Again, if that is the reason, if he misses the final with another yellow, that's a big risk, because we know Paqueta, he will put himself about, he will make tackles, and he does have the tendency to pick up yellow cards like that. So for me, no, you have to play him. You have to play your best team. It doesn't matter. You can't kind of think about the what ifs. You need to win the match. And if that means risking him getting a yellow card, then that's the risk you have to take, because you can't go into it with a kind of negative mindset of thinking, oh, what if he gets a yellow card? When you take Paqueta out, that team will fall apart anyway. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Would you do the same?
For me, you play him. This is West Ham United. It's not Lucas Paqueta. I'm sorry, but we need him on the pitch to get us to the final, because I'll be honest, some of the fan base think we're already there. I'm not like. When we're there. Do you know what I mean? And our name's literally engraved in being a finalist. But until we're there, you play your best team at the best time, and you attack the game from the front. Do you know what I mean? And not try and defend the lead or anything like that. So for me, I make mine short and sweet. He has to play me, 100%.
Same with you, Mike?
Yeah, I think we play him. I think, unfortunately, the option then is, well, you play either Lanzini, Fornals potentially in his favoured position for once, or you play Flynn Downs. And let's face it, 2 of those players are very good at ball retention, but not very good at penetration with the ball at all. So you're losing a player that not only can drive with the ball with it at his feet, you're also losing someone who can actually play those incisive passes. With Fornals at the moment, things are just not clicking for him at all. But also fans are complaining about him actually trying to do these first-time touches or try and make, again, these passes that we would see Paqueta try. And people are now saying, oh, you just need to knuckle down and retain possession. And yet they'll moan that there's no creativity. So I think we're a bit bipolar at the minute as a fan base, because we were talking about we want players to retain possession, and yet we'll criticise some players for trying to be more extravagant in their play or more open in their play. Others, we will then just go, yeah, but that's fine because they're retaining possession. So I think we've got to be mindful of that. And we're going to have to play Paqueta, because I think, quite frankly, no one else in our fan base is going to support any other option that comes in over Paqueta. So it's as simple as that. we have 13 players that are going to get flogged or have been flogged really for a majority of the season because the boss doesn't trust them, hasn't given them the time to get a feel for things, and their confidence is shot to hell for a lot, that people are now starting to believe that they are bad players when a majority of these players that aren't playing were intrinsic to our great success over the last few years, and in particular last season. And now they're all deemed terrible, poor players, and that doesn't just happen overnight. And it's not. You can
Mike,
see
on that point, do you think the same's happened with Moyes though, where fans have kind of been so full of praise for him? He's this really good manager, and now this season it's just dropped off a cliff. He's this awful manager who isn't enough to progress us. Just playing devil's advocate, not my opinion on it.
No, my opinion has been the same all the way through. That whilst Moyes was doing well, he deserved praise, but there were big deficiencies and problems throughout his tenure, in my opinion, in my eyes. And this year, it's really come to the forefront. Now, as I said at the time, it's really hard to criticize someone when they're winning. You can make points as to what you see as problems, but when you're winning, it's very hard for that.
I think we've lost him. Oh, you're back.
No, back. Sorry, I think it's my internet. But yeah, it's really hard to stake a claim as to problems with a manager when you're winning. It just looks like moaning and nitpicking. And it's a way of just essentially stopping any true, honest conversation. And Moyes is slightly a victim of his own success, but even more so, he's shown how much of a stubborn, set in his way manager, because there has been points raised, and I'm pretty sure you even raised it before about Moyes and trying to take too much control and trying to manage everything, and we've seen things change and drop off. And funny enough, we've seen set pieces getting better recently, and that seems to be come about with this, I guess, more open Moyes. That's what's claimed, but I don't think he's particularly well liked either within the club. Maybe
on that point, because there has been a lot around the fringe players. We've said, I mean, even yourself, E20, you're not a massive fan of Fornals. Has that come about this season, or has it kind of always been that? And I guess a follow-up question is Moyes to blame for what's going on here? Because there's a lot of criticism around individuals, around their performances, but deep down, are there bigger issues which are coming from Moyes himself?
For me, listen, Fabio Fornals is the sort of player that you need in your team. Yeah, I will say that. Yeah, I don't hate the man, but I think he's massively overhyped for what he brings to West Ham. Like if you can name me 3 things he does very, very well, I'd like to hear it. Like this season, he just hasn't been his year. Yeah, at all. Right, I would give him a year to a point, but that's pushing it. Like I see people knocking Ben Rama quite a lot, and I get a lot of stick on social media for me backing Ben Rama up consistently. But Ben Rama is a forward-thinking player. He might not be a very good forward-thinking player, but at least he goes forward. And he doesn't look to sort of keep passing it and keep recycling the ball. When I look at Moyes, it's a very, very hard one for me. I look at him and I think he's been massively fanned out. I think he's rotten to the core, and I think his backroom staff have seen that. And how he's still here, I just don't know. I really don't. I think the only reason why he's still here is because David Sullivan will not go out and pay out a lot of money for another manager. And that is the be all and end all. If Sullivan was going to sell, which I would love him to sell, and I was thinking he was going to sell this year, I don't believe he will do anytime soon. Maybe things would be different, but it would not surprise me if he stays here another year, lets him go at the end of next year, and then Sullivan will sell up. Because Sullivan doesn't want to put any more money into West Ham, in my opinion.
Well, there is now the talk of a director of football that's going to be appointed this summer. There's talk of Rob Newman being relieved of his roles in terms of kind of the scouting recruitment. And Moyes is going to have less control. And like you mentioned there, E20, it doesn't look like now that the signs are pointing towards change. They were for a little bit, but now it's kind of gone back to that Sullivan control mindset where he wants to bring in a director of football, but he's going to report to Sullivan and own it's going to work that way. So how do you guys see that going with the director of football? Because it has potential to be a really, really good thing for the club. But the way I see it and the way it's being approached is I feel like it's just a way for Sullivan to take more control back over transfers in the club. But what do you guys think?
I'm sorry, mate, but anything where Sullivan's got his hands on it is never a good thing. It's as simple as that. For me, I think it's a massive bad move the director of football is a good move, but Sullivan being involved in it is a massive bad move, and he's going to be involved with it with a lot of money and all. Because if we do sell Declan Rice in the summer, we have a lot of money at our disposal, and you don't be surprised if we're going to go out and get players from God knows where, no one's ever heard of, and they could be flops. Do you know what I mean? He's trying to go down this mould of Brighton and Brentford model, right? With Sullivan, he has this sort of mindset, yeah. But they have been working on this for years. Brighton and Brentford, right? I've got a Brentford mate, and they've been on this for a long, long time, doing the old data analysis and things like that. You don't just
the past decade. This is what they've been doing.
Yeah,
really, Brentford.
And the way I look at it is they're trying to go down that with West Ham, which it ain't going to work straight away. Do you know what I'm saying? So anything where Sullivan's got his hands on, sadly, I don't think it's going to work, in my opinion.
Mike, what about you? Again, Sullivan is a muppet. Director of football means nothing if they report to Sully, who knows nothing about the sport. What's your take on that?
So if I take Sullivan out of it, principally it's a great idea. What has been suggested by others who have fairly good links are that one of the reasons we're looking at a director of football is that it's in order to help Noble. So to give Noble a bit more experience or more experience to lean on, because he can help with that academy side. He's obviously very much aware of the academy, the trappings of being an academy player and bringing through and how to create those pathways. He very much knows that and can understand how to kind of set a culture within a football club. He knows that. His problem is he doesn't really know how then you go out to market to get players, how then you bring those players in, how you sell potentially the main part of that dream. He would have obviously been involved in those player conversations when they were coming in, but wouldn't really been involved to the point of being involved around the finances, working out from that business side. Whilst he does have a good head on his shoulders and some good sense, and he's done a lot of things since he left football and trying to get himself up to speed, he does need that support network because he is inexperienced within this role, and he needs to detach away from his personal feelings towards existing players. Like, just as an example, his feelings towards David Moyes and maybe say Cresswell. Some of us would say neither of those people should be at West Ham next year. Some would argue they would. But obviously, Noble is probably going to have more of affinity in which to keep those two around for longevity, but also because he has a very good personal relationship, which maybe isn't actually rooted in what is best for the football club, if you get my meaning.
Do you think Noble is the type of person to do that then, to kind of take those personal relationships over the business side?
Maybe in the short to medium term, whilst he's still trying to feel out his role. Because there's been a lot of talk of that Noble works with or for Moyes, when in actual fact, he's the sporting director. He is the person who has Moyes work for him. And I think that's part of the problem. It's because of that relationship they had in the past, it's still very much the gaffer and Nobes, and it's not really working. It shouldn't be that.
Do you find though, Mike, that he sort of, in one way, that Sullivan's threw Rob Newman right under the bus to save Moyes' skin to a point?
He's absolutely thrown Newman under the bus. And I don't think he's done it to help out Moyes. I think he's just done it because we did a thing on it. It's about associating Newman with Moyes. Because when Moyes came in, he's like, we're going to get you someone on the support network. Who do you want? And he's like, well, I know Rob Newman. I've worked with him before. We bring him in because he's at Manchester City. So it's a name, good caliber and everything like that. So it looks really good. You've associated him and put him in with the manager. And then when the manager fails, everything upstream that is attached and downstream is a direct result of that. And the claim that the players that we brought in haven't done anything is ridiculous. Paqueta, once he's been utilised and once he's kind of understood what's been asked of him, has been a much better player. Skamaka has been vitally important in Europa Conference League. He's also scored some vital goals in the Premier League in which to put us in this position where we're now safe. Emerson has been a bit hot and cold. Again, injury, has kind of impacted him, but again, has been largely good. Up front, Ings has been a terrible signing, and Downs, we'll wait and see with that one, but it's just seemed to have been a solid squad signing, but nothing really more. And I think, again, he's just kind of thrown him under the bus, much like we saw with Casillas. Yeah. And yet, there was also at that time where they threw him under the bus, but yet they seemed to kind of recoil away from the fact that they wanted and pushed for João Felix when he was at Benfica before anyone tried to move for him. And then when Benfica realised, oh, hang on, a bigger club's coming in. Oh, we need to pay his release clause. And remember, 6 months to a year later, he was sold for 108 million quid. So, and he wanted to sign Ansu Fati. They wanted to sign Mendy, who went to Chelsea. But instead they said no. So they went, okay, we'll get Roberto because we know Roberto. Or we'll have to get David Martin as well. And then we bragged about it.
Yeah.
To Claret and Hugh. So we've constantly done this where we've given people a rope and then it's not even enough rope to hang themselves. We've just chucked the noose on and just yanked it and gone, oh, well, I told you they're a failure. And it's the fact of the matter is it's actually they didn't necessarily want one or two players. And because it hasn't been a barnstormer, they're going, oh, well, it's terrible. These players ain't done. Let's not forget the likes of Eze was someone Moyes wanted to sign over Benrahma, but the board wanted to sign Benrahma. So they binned off Eze when he got thinking. Obviously, Benrahma's done well for us. Could argue maybe Eze would have done better in terms of because he's homegrown talent and all that stuff might have been a bit better for us as a centre midfield option long term. But they like to pull the rug out from underneath people and then blame them for any problems, and that constantly happens with signings and so on. And that's part of the issue. Now, the director of football, technically speaking, I don't have a problem with the board saying they want more control. And the reason why I say that is not because director of football is not just about signing players. It's about, normally it's an amalgamation of the sporting director, or you have a director of football. It's either a combination of two, or it's just you have those two separate roles, right? Now, the director of football arguably being part of the board as opposed to being part of the coaching staff, and that coaching environment is much better because that means you have always longevity. So you can replace managers time and again, but you still have that top level structure. You keep all of your scouts, you keep your analytics team because they're attached up funnel rather than across with the coaching staff. And then that's your easily interchangeable pieces and then you can always have that consistent level of targets, that consistent level of playing style, managers, so on and so forth. So principally, I think it's a really good move from the board. The issue is the control he is going to look to have. And yes, Slob, it is probably something like that could potentially end up happening. I don't think it will. But, when we need to find a player that we haven't scouted, there's no doubt we're going to, turn on FIFA and we're going to turn on a Football Manager to review a player. And I know that sounds like a joke, but that has been done. Hence why we didn't sign Jonathan Tah before, because he was really slow when looked on those types of search engines.
I mean, with the kind of director of football, this is going to be a massive summer for West Ham as it is, in terms of, we've already mentioned how many players, how aging our squad is, how many players are coming to the end of their contract. So this isn't just a rebuild in terms of, changing the personnel in the squad. It's a rebuild and then another rebuild, because what we've seen now is, yes, in the Conference League, we've been able to get away with our kind of second squad because it's still been good enough to get through. That wouldn't have been the case if we were in the Europa League this season. We would have had to play our full strength team, especially in these latter rounds as well. So when we come into this summer, if a director of football comes in and, we're given that kind of war chest of the Declan Rice money that could potentially come in, it's a massive moment for that person in charge. And how do you guys see this summer going? Because it is such a big moment for us. I think we're pretty much going to be Premier League team, so we can say that. One thing that is going to be massive is whether we have that European pool, because if we don't have the European pool, not only is it going to be difficult to attract players, but it's going to make it a lot more likely that our players, including the likes of Paqueta, Scamacca, are going to be looking the other way, and it's going to be difficult to hold on. So then you're trying to battle two sides, not only build a project, but hold on to the project you've actually got. So how do you guys see this summer going overall? Do you think we have the ability to keep hold of these players and turn it around in the summer?
I'm actually worried, mate. Really concerned, because it's the biggest money West Ham's ever going to have, ever in their history. If Declan Rice goes for the reported 120 million, West Ham will have a lot of money to rebuild a squad. And we all know what it's like when you try and bring in 5, 6, 7 players and you open them to hit the ground running straight away. and I am nervous about it. I really am. I feel that this summer is going to make or break West Ham. We're either going to end up with European football, but I don't think we're going to do well in the league next year. I think it's going to be similar to this year, or we're going to have no football and we're just going to literally go back to how we was for a few years and hopefully get back up the league rather than be where we are. But I am nervous about next season. I really am.
Do you see Moy staying then, early 20 or now?
Yeah, he's here, mate. He's here. What I think personally, I think they haven't got the bottle to sack him. I've spoke to Mike multiple times on his channel, and I've turned around and said, and we both said the same thing. He would have been gone a long time ago if they would have had the balls to sack him. Really, but they
really,
didn't.
Wouldn't it? At the World Cup.
Do you know what I mean? November, beginning part of January, and every time he's been saved by a miracle result sort of thing. Something's happened where he's won a game and they're giving benefit of that. If he stays next year, there's no guarantees that he's going to bring in players, that he's going to fit the system that he wants to play, because he's played 5 systems this year that really haven't really worked. And the only one that's really working is the one that we're using now. And let's be honest, playing possum in games, I don't like it. I really don't, because if a team does score against us, then we have got to come forward. And if they're a good side, they can hit us on the break and do us, basically. So I am nervous about next year. I really am. So if you lose Declan Rice, you're losing a key member of your team. You're losing the heartbeat of your team. And don't get me wrong, West Ham will always find other players. Well, West Ham will live on past Declan Rice. Do you know what I'm saying? So, but I am nervous, mate, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's also the nerves of who we're going to sign, because there is, names like Ward-Prowse and Calvin Phillips being kind of mustered around, when in reality they're not the type of players we need to be going for at this stage. And if we're going to rebuild, there is kind of the other side that we've not mentioned in terms of the director of football coming in. This actually might not be coming from Sullivan's side. It might be coming from the other side, which is Krasinski. I mean, Eamon mentions it here. It could be, touch wood, hopefully, that David Sullivan could be the one that's on his way out. And, this director of football approach is coming from that new side, which is the Krasinski side. And it could be ringing that, there is going to be change, and Sullivan could be the one on the way out. And the
only problem with that is this year is that if we do go for a director of football, which is looking likely that it's going to be, then there's no guarantees that whoever this is going to hit the ground running with the signings he's going to go for. Yeah. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like you're putting a lot of pressure on the next man to come in and literally find us 4, 5, 6 gems, and hopefully they're all going to work. Do you know what I'm saying? If it is Kadinsky's doing, then so be it. But I don't believe it is, mate. I believe this is Sullivan saying, right, I want complete control of this situation before I sell up, because I'm not happy about how this season's gone. Like, do you know what I mean?
I agree to a point where you're saying. I personally do feel that he will be looking to sell. I think he wants a premium, and I think there's a lot of things that are wrapped up in what's delaying what's happening. For instance, great point by Slob about the inheritance tax. That was kind of set as well. I think they obviously did their transition before gold went, so it's slightly different for the business in terms of inheritance tax and so on. So 4th of July could be a very important period based on that point. Should that all be correct? And I'm pretty sure Slob's bang on with that. Then obviously July could be a point where that happens. We also got to remember that there is the current legal dispute between West Ham and the LLDC. David Krasinski is also talking to the LLDC away from West Ham and away from David Sullivan, away from Karen Brady, who really, let's be honest, are probably at the heart of said disputes. Once that dispute is resolved, a more amicable conversation can be had with West Ham. If that stadium can be resolved in a way that suits, say, Krasinski, that gives him additional weight, because it's potentially something he could purchase to add to his shares to give him more clout at West Ham. There could be a premium given onto the amount that he's already agreed to buy West Ham for. Again, we've got Trip Smith, who may decide, I don't think he will at this point, but he has 10% he could decide to sell up. If Gold's family sells, I think even 20%, that would put Krasinski in a position where he has the 51 ruling share. So there are ways in which he can take over West Ham without a full takeover and without essentially buying anything off of David Sullivan. He can essentially take control by taking shares elsewhere. So I do think there's a lot of things that are controlling that. I would probably suggest that the director of football is maybe a joint idea, because I think they want to take away the control from Moyes, maybe because I don't think Kretinsky wants David Moyes, and you've said this many times, Jimbo, as well.
Yeah.
Kretinsky doesn't want him, really. And I think it's maybe at this point in time, it's the compromise between the two. It's, well, look, if we keep David Moyes, if we don't, nothing happens and we keep David Moyes, we'll take control and we'll have that. So that'll be my compromise to you, that if you allow me to keep him, should that be the decision, we will control what comes in as a transfer perspective and remove that from David Moyes. Because if we don't trust him completely and we're thinking of maybe binning him off after, say, 10 games of the next season if we go badly, then let's protect ourselves and bring in the players what we want rather than what he wants. Not a great approach, but just devil's advocate, that could be the process behind it.
Yeah.
And the way I kind of look at it is, I think there's going to be such a big summer of change. And obviously we look losing Declan Rice. There could be change at boardroom level. We could see a different layer added above the kind of playing staff and also coaching staff as well. Could see a brand new coaching staff instilled as well. So that is huge in itself as a set of change. That could go one of two ways. It could also go the Newcastle way that we've seen, that it buoys everyone so much. And based on some of the things that I've said, it possibly could do that with a lot of players, because it does sound like it's not exactly the happiest atmosphere at the club, besides what's been said by those within the club. It doesn't sound like...
Do you think that could also help the situation? I mean, you look at what Eddie Howe did at Newcastle and the rejuvenation of the current players in the squad. We're kind of sat here saying there's going to be a massive rebuild, and it is. But if you bring in the correct manager that is going to get these players playing, like Scamacca that we've mentioned isn't playing to his strengths, like someone like Fornals who hasn't been given a chance in his natural position, even to Paqueta to an extent, because he's played the majority of the season out of position and not understanding what Moyes wants to do. Do you think that makes it even more enticing for not just the fans, but the owners to change manager, because it could be actually protecting the assets they've got as well at the club?
I think it could do. It could also, sorry, Jay, I don't know, Jamal, just one thing I was going to say, what it could also do is maybe open up the pathway for the youth players as well. We have such a great under-18s campaign this year. We've obviously, Mubama came on and immediately made an impact in the Brentford game. And we've got the likes of Earthy. There's Potts in the under-21s. We've also got Ollie Charles from the under-18s. Casey's also had a debut this year from there. Kadua, who's not had a chance yet of all of that under-18 team that's performed so well as Earthy. So even from those guys, they could also be looking at, well, there might be my chance now with a new manager to go in. So again, that could also help us in the market, because we create our own assets and our own, the next Rice. Not probably going to be the same level, but what I mean is we're creating on a next level of homegrown players. I've said it many a time that I think in the current way that football is and the homegrown necessity, you're better off creating your own players and maybe picking one or two from the Championship. And also for European qualification, I'm pretty sure you need to have 4 youth players or 4 players that have been at the club since like the age of 16, or at least 2 years before they're 18 or something like that to qualify as a youth player. So if we want to be in European football, we have to have at least 4 of them available. So again, we have to look to potentially have a manager who's going to bring those guys through and maybe find 1 or 2 or maybe give them that chance. So it could be, all in all, a great thing for the club, because it could mean some of the youngsters are incorporated, which gives them something a bit fresh. It means we don't maybe then go into the market. Maybe we chance our arm and go, well, I'll tell you what, again, this is right out there. It's not won't happen, but maybe they go, Potts has really impressed us in the summer. We're happy with Paqueta. What we're actually going to do is improve on Scamacca. We're probably going to give Downs a chance, but we're also going to look to maybe develop Potts and give a space for him to develop within that defensive midfield position, see if he can, progress in the Premier League. And maybe it'll do things like look at Kadua maybe on the right-hand side as back up to Bowen rather than going out to market for a right-sided player. Because I think if we're really honest and we're really hard-nosed, there are probably 8 to 10, maybe even 11 new faces we need really to get rid of what has been deadwood, to replace those that are leaving, but also to moved our base level up, as well as a couple of improvements in the first 11. So it's a huge undertaking this summer, but it can be done, and some of it can be supported from what we have within. But I think that only happens if we have someone fresh who's willing to be open and willing to try things like that. Because I think because we have to bring in so many players, utilising and leaning on our youth system to maybe bring out 2 or 3 players across positions is probably the smarter thing to do. Like, letting Cresswell go for Ollie Charles to come into a position, maybe selling on Emerson to get a starting left back.
Yeah.
Even if, like, again, the AZ left back, who's been absolutely superb. Like, yes, he's 21. That may they mean, oh well, Ollie Charles is limited, but Charles is only like 17. Even if we have a defender for the next 5 years, if we go up to the market and buy one, in 5 years, Ollie Charles is probably over going to potentially be pushing them or surpassing them. And also, he's a very flexible player. He could even move midfield, left wing, left back, and so on. So I do think we need to be a bit more introspective and a bit more kind of internalized with some of our views on players, because I think there is some talent that we can look to bring up. But, Slob puts it, right? We need to increase our talent, and that's from the base level up to the actual starting 11, but also reduce the average age. And as we saw here, going for the likes of Ward-Prowse and Calvin Phillips is not going to do that. Calvin Phillips is 28 this summer. Sorry, in around December, I think, and only made, by comparison, Declan Rice has played over 6,000 minutes over the last 2 seasons for West Ham in the Premier League alone. Calvin Phillips has only managed 1,800 minutes. That isn't a player you can replace with. And I even think Ward-Prowse is nowhere near. It's potentially probably the only one closest in terms of number of minutes. But again, he's 28. Whilst I'm not against buying those players, but we already have too many of those. If we're bringing down the rest of the squad age, by all means, you can get a player like a Ward-Prowse. But also, I don't think even some Southampton fans are as infused by Ward-Prowse as those outside of Southampton. And they look at players like Lavia as a far better player. If you were going to be spending your money, they would probably say you're better off spending it there than going out and getting Ward-Prowse, who seems to be overpriced. But again, that could be because of the homegrown talent piece in the quota we have. Long tangent, but
yeah, no, I think you're right. I think there needs to be a balance. I think that's the crucial thing. We have a lot of rebuilding to do, but there needs to be development within the team and within the squad as well. Because you look at the players we do have, we do still have a really good team. That's what I'm kind of holding on to as hope. Even with Declan Rice departing, there's plenty of players out there that we could bring in that would be, a very good defensive midfielder for us. It wouldn't be what Declan Rice brings because he's just such a unique player, but there are players out there that can. And, Eamon even says here he thinks Rice might end up going to Man City for 80 million plus Phillips. Now, we should be staying away from anything like that. We should just be taking the money in terms of what we can get and then recruiting with actual scouting and actual players that either A, Moyes wants to bring in because we just have to and align with the director of football, or B, what the new manager wants to bring in. So just to end this, guys, because there has been a lot of talk around.
I do love Snob's ambition. He's been talking to me about this all week, but it's why not take that heavy punt? If you're trying to take our best player, then we'll take like Guimaraes, which would be a fantastic. If that was ever to be pulled off, that would be a masterstroke. So if Guimaraes and Paqueta back together, because they had a brilliant wavelength at Leon, would be superb. But
let me just end that. There's 0% chance of that.
No, we are clutching. Is that ever happening? Yeah.
But yeah, just to end on this with around Moyes, because there's been talk. We've all said how we feel about Moyes and how it should be, but looking at it from a different perspective, if he wins that Europa Conference League for us and we go through against AZ and we beat either Basel and Fiorentina and he lifts that trophy and he's dancing with Paqueta, we've got the trophy in our hands. Does he deserve the job? Looking at it from an outsider in, does he deserve to keep his place at West Ham for what he's done in the last 3 seasons?
For me, personally, I think it's the perfect time to say goodbye. Because let's be honest here, what I was going to say previous is if West Ham are fighting relegation next year, you ain't going to get a high-end manager. But you are going to get a high-end manager now in the summer if you're in European football, if you've got Europa League and Moyes is gone, in my opinion. Listen, I can't thank Moyes enough for what he has done, but some of the things he has done also are criminal offences. Like going back to a year ago when we were fighting for the Champions League, and he let go of a striker because he said we didn't need one, and it ended up costing us Champions League, and it ended up really costing us the semi-final. Do you know what I'm saying? To a point. But you know what? If he does win it, great. Right? We haven't won a trophy in 43 years, and let's be honest, all of us would love to see that. Do you know what I'm saying? And for 43 years, it's been very, very hard to watch. Be a West Ham fan. But I've got to be realistic. Sometimes all good things do come to an end. And I look at him and I think, what more can he do after this? Like, do you know what I'm saying? The only way is down from this position. So for me, I would like him to go at the end of the season, but it ain't going to happen, mate. Because personally, I think they've already got it set up that he's going to go at the end of his contract, and then probably a takeover or something will happen. And then, Kadinsky can go and get the man he really wants rather than Sullivan.
Yeah. Mike, what's your take on it?
So I can understand where people come from with, he's done really well for us over this period. He's taken us from being a relegation team back to being a relegation team. So he's done really well with that. If I'm being flippant, but no, he has done well over the period of time. He's got us into 2 Europa finals, semi-finals even. Granted, this semi-final, whilst I praise us getting this far, I'm still not going to overpraise it and say that it's a great season, because quite frankly, the idea that us being in this situation in the Conference League is an achievement, to me, is not an achievement. Being in the final and winning is the achievement, because we have played, by and large, League One and Championship teams. I've said it the whole way through. It's a simple fact of the matter. It's true. None of those teams we've played would last in the Premier League. Half of them wouldn't even manage in the Championship. So it's slightly I find it slightly embarrassing when how much praise is heaped on what we've done in Europa Conference this season, because the level is so far removed from what we played against last year.
He has to win it, doesn't he, to get the praise? He has to win it.
He has to win it. To be honest, he had to win it at the start of the competition. We were by far the strongest team. As soon as Villarreal went out, you look at it and go, there is no one there. There's no reason why we should not be winning it. And that's not arrogance. That's just a simple fact of, if you have the amount of money that we have and what we've spent in that team, if you have the level of competition that we have in terms of the league we're from as well as the players, it's almost an embarrassment not to win it.
I think as well, because our league form has suffered so much. If we were still doing well in the Premier League, I think people would be a bit more accepting of maybe getting to a semi-final and then crashing out. But we've put all our eggs now into the Conference League. He has to win it, because otherwise this season has been a failure.
I think his only real game or his only real test will be in the final for me.
Yeah.
Because I'll be honest with you, Fiorentina, I know mugs, they are a decent side. They've got some decent players in there. Basel are not the same team they once were, but they were a Champions League side many years ago, and you know what I mean? And I know they've fallen down a bit. If I look at it, I agree with what Mike just said there, 100%. Up until now, we haven't played anyone of any note who would look at and think, oh dear, they've given us a good game. Do you know what I'm saying? Even AZ, for instance, I was expecting more from them in the first leg, and when they done not a lot,
it could have easily been 3-4-1.
Yeah,
very easily, really, had we had a bit more sense about us and a bit more composure. So I just look at it and go, it's a good time for him to go as a manager, especially if we win. Again, people will go, well, his form fluctuated at Everton. It's like, yes, but also the time at Everton didn't have this level of competition. Teams didn't have the level of recruitment expertise and management back then as they do now. You could kind of get away with it. And as we've seen throughout this year, the lack of adaptability, he may change formations, but the tactics don't change. The lack of adaptability in games in which to stop or prevent teams has been, at times, almost slightly damning. It's been terrible. Some of the football's been turgid, and that's been polite. Some of the integration of new players has been terrible, and he's had to bring in a lot of players. We're going to have to do exactly the same next year. We've lost 19 games this Premier League season, and that's consistently been blamed on arguably the new players, but by and large, it's been at least 8 of the lineup has been the old faithful.
We've played five different tactics, 5 different systems. Sorry, like the system this year. Like if we all go back to the start of the season, he was setting up in a 3-4-3, and it's ended up now we're a 4-3-3. And we've played. I think this season we've played 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1, 5-3-2. 3-4-3, and there's something else in there where he's played it. Like, it just doesn't make no sense. Where like, for me, there's no plan with him. That's as simple as that. There's no plan, and it would not surprise me in the slightest if he goes over to AZ and he sets up in a defensive way.
Yeah,
no, I agree, and I think that's the problem. It's to put it in another way, it's a different haircut but the same voice. You know, it's kind of that exact same thing.
Yeah.
So no matter what the tactic is, it's the same game plan. It doesn't change. The rumors, and there's been so many rumors about the discourse in the dressing room and issues with Moyes and his, I guess, for a lack of a better term, arrogance. Some would say self-belief, but also it's come across as arrogance. He's essentially put players to one side and has no real wish or desire in which to engage with them. And I think overall this season, a lot of what he's done before, then that tough love kind of stuff was working, but also tough love is always something that does well when you're winning. Mourinho is a prime example of that. His tough love, when teams aren't winning, has gone completely opposite way. And he did do that for a while at Roma until finally certain things kind of clicked, and he also softened a little bit. And then they went on to do it. And that's the problem, is when you're not winning, if you have that tough love approach and that pushing players to one side and also playing negatively, when you're not winning, players then start to question. And if I just
don't think he knows what else he can do. Like, if I'm being honest, what more can he really do to benefit? Like next season, what's the ambition next season? Like, just for argument's sake, if we use two scenarios here, if we use without European football as the easiest scenario, so we've got 38 games in the Premier League. Like, what's his ambition? Is it top 10, top 8, standard league?
I think he's going to drop it back to top 10.
Yeah,
mid-table, top 10, because he even said that what we did in those last few seasons is unsustainable. Well, hang on, you're telling us to think like a big club only 5 minutes ago. Now you're telling us that to be a big us being a big club is unsustainable. What is it? You're basically tried to cover his own arse, and some took it hook, line, and sinker and was like, "Yeah, it's a fair point. It's a fair point. We're only West Ham." It's like, no, you can't.
That mentality.
Yeah, you sit there and you think we're massive. Yes, we're being ironic by saying we're massive, but you're also we were feeding into that for a bit because the manager was telling us to believe that. And we started.
I do blame our mentality though on that. Like, I look at our mentality and I look at us and I think, well, why are we not saying that we want top 10 every year? Like, don't get me wrong. Listen, like you, Mike, I've sat there and seen some of the worst players at West Ham in our lifetime, right? So I'm not going to be deluded and say that West Ham are going to finish top 10 every year, but there should be a goal and there should be a standard at West Ham to say it has to be top 10. Like, do you know what I mean? Like top 10, top 12. Like, do you know what I'm saying?
I think with Moyes, he's kind of like you mentioned, James. He can't go next year into what it's like. What does he do? Because this season, the past 2 seasons we've done really well. At the beginning of this season, he was given absolute ton of money to bring in the players that he wanted to and make the decisions to improve the team. And he even said at the beginning of the season, the objective for us now is to establish ourselves as a top 6 club and, compete with the big boys. And hopefully the players coming in are going to do that. He's failed to do that. So you can't then give him another season to try and spend another 100, 200 million from the Declan Rice sale, whatever it will be, to then try and go again when he's just failed so miserably this season. Because
I think it's also been put out that David Sullivan put out via methods, as always, that basically Newman and Moyes will not see a penny out of them, which basically means they're going to go and get who they want in. So again, what is the point in having a manager if you're going to circumvent them that much?
And yet again, you're going to have a similar situation how it was with Syed Benrahma, a player that he didn't really fancy, or he didn't want, he wanted someone else. If West Ham go and handpick 4 or 5 players and Moyes doesn't like them, the stubborn Moyes will appear and it will cause problems again. It's just it's just a circle all the time with West Ham. For me personally, I look at it like this. I think he has to go really to a point and have a fresh start, West Ham. Do you know what I mean? Like saying fresh. Like, you've took us here, You've took us to a level where we've not been to before. I think I do agree with Mike what he says. I think the conference semi-final is massively overhyped. I think the Europa League one was very, very good. I think for the teams that we beat, like Lyon away, Seville at home, you got to respect that, But this season, the Conference League, like unless we win it, then we will appreciate it. Do you know what I mean? If we lose in the final or we lose Thursday night, because it ain't a given on Thursday night, I know that this is West Ham and nothing ever is like for certain. But for me, I think he should just bail out and go, you know what? I've had a really good run at West Ham. I'm going to hand it over to somewhere else to take us to a level like a younger manager who can develop young players. Like for me, I look at the young players we've got, the under-18s and all that. Are they really going to get a look in with Moyes here? I don't believe they will do, mate. Exactly. In my opinion,
I think he's peaked. We've seen that he's peaked. He's he came in when we were battling relegation. He's gone like that, and he's been given this money to try and keep going on that. And what I will say is, it is very tough to do that. It is extremely difficult to do that with the teams that are coming through in the Premier League now, how competitive it is. But once you've failed to do so and you've spent such a large sum of money, you can't then be given an excuse as to what's happened or what's gone wrong. So
I think he's been very lucky and all though, like in certain aspects. Like I think this season he's been very lucky with like even still having a job. That's the first thing. I think he's very lucky with the signing of Jesse Lingard. I think having Lingard come in and be the player he was, let's be honest, no West Ham fan dreamed that he would come in and literally like transform us to a point of being a really unbelievable attacking side.
He was Payet-esque in terms of his level of influence. And I hate to say that because Payet is probably one of the best players I've seen play for West Ham, probably bar Tevez and Di Canio. His impact was so influential. It was at the levels of what Payet had for us.
But it's like you would not have seen that. Like I think for me personally, I think he's been very lucky in the way he's gone around it. I think he's got away with murder for a long time though. Like ever since sort of, and I always used, people would look at the Liverpool game a few years ago when we won 3-2 and say that was like the best game we had, and that was the best. That's probably the best result, best performance we've had since. Like since then, we haven't been the same team. But I look at the Kidderminster FA Cup game as the game where I knew it was starting to fall apart slowly. Like when you're struggling against a side like that, and we're supposed to be West Ham United, who are European, like Europa League team, just didn't wash for me, and it has gone down slowly. Like, and I think he should definitely just go.
You need Fornals and Declan Rice to bail him out in that game.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
Exactly. Well, I mean, there's a potential lot of change coming in the summer, but obviously the focus now is Thursday night. I really hope we do get through. I hope Moyes goes for it a little bit more and isn't as pragmatic as we probably all three of us agree that he will be on Thursday and take that defensive approach. But that's going to be it for today's stream. Thank you all for tuning in, and James, thank you for coming on, mate. Really appreciate your time as well.
No worries at all, man.
Make sure to check out his YouTube channel. I'm sure you're all aware of it already, but yeah, that's going to be it for today. Make sure to leave a like on the stream if you did enjoy, and as always, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you are new around here. And lads, on to Thursday. One thing for us left to say before we end, that is,
come on, you Irons. Don't let us down.
See you later.
Perfect ending right there.
Yeah, exactly. See you later, guys.
Take care, man.